Hey everybody, I'm Max of TFLnow, and today we are looking at the Lexus LX600. And I'm specifically going to be looking at the technology of it because it's using Lexus's new infotainment system, which to the pleasure of many critics of the former system, has a touchscreen. So we'll be talking about the screens and some of the really cool interior tech on this luxurious SUV. So come inside with me and let's take a look. So this is the F Sport trim of the Lexus LX600, which is actually based off the Land Cruiser platform. But we're not really going to be talking about the vehicle dynamics so much with this. I just want to talk about the interior. And if Cole, my videographer, kind of just pans around here, you can see that the materials in this dash all around the car are suitably luxurious. And also you will just see, even before we start up, that we have buttons for our climate. This is always a contentious issue now in the auto industry. And Lexus, just like sister brand Toyota, is being quite conservative with still giving you those buttons. So you might be wondering why there's two screens, and we'll get to that in a second here. But overall, I think this is a very modern layout, and thank goodness we have a physical volume dial too. Very, very nice. That is just, good to see in modern cars. And if we look below on the dash also, there are very nice USB ports in the console. You get USB-A and USB-C. Another very cool feature on this LX600 is this center console, which can actually open this way and this way. But if I open it so that my videographer Cole can see it, you have a cool box. So if I were to turn this on with the engine running, you'd hear some fans start up, and that'll cool whatever you want to put in there. So this is a really cool mechanism right here. Of course, our standard cup holders, and in standard Lexus fashion, they are decently sized, so you can fit most drinks you would want to quite well in here. But let's look at the actual technology and the features of the interior screens. You get quite the fancy startup animation across all of the screens in this vehicle. And what are those screens? Well, on my dash here, we have the gauges, which are partially analog and partially digital. And that's an interesting approach. I don't think, honestly, it's the most modern looking thing I've ever seen, but that's good because it's only one of the three screens we have in the middle here. What I find in a lot of cars, even in the luxury segment, is that their maps are just not particularly responsive. That's not the case in this Lexus. Pinching and zooming is very nice, and it has those Google points of interest, so you can actually basically direct yourself anywhere off of Google Maps. I don't know if it's using Google Maps for navigation, but it is using Google for those points of interest with the voice assistant. And Lexus's voice assistant is a lot better in this generation as well. And of course, they're giving you a touchscreen. This was not something you had in the previous models, so this is really nice as opposed to that weird indirect touchpad interface. Now below, there's another screen here that I think is a little bit less modern. It's nice because it gives you a lot of AC info. You can see you can go between your seats, you can go to the full vehicle air conditioning, and you can go to some settings on the screen. Now, interestingly enough, I thought this was like interior lighting. Apparently, this is just like if you ever, started up like a games console or a TV or maybe a Blu-ray player, and it has you adjust your screen calibration. That's what this is. These colors are just a test pattern, basically, to make sure your screen is in an ideal setting. I think it's a little bit weird to have that in a car. It should honestly just do this automatically, but you can change that yourself, which is interesting. And you can even just turn the screen off if you don't like it. But it'll be there if you want to touch to turn it back on. So climate controls are here. You control stuff like the fan speed through the screen, but you get these blessed physical controls below, which I think are just very nice to have. We have a lot of options here. You can, of course, control the zones for each individual passenger, and you have this feature Lexus calls Climate Concierge. What this does is it's like a step beyond automatic climate control. Not only does it, change the fan speed and the direction of air to suit the temperature you want, it'll also adjust the cooled, heated seats and the heated steering wheel automatically in accordance with everything else. So that's very nice, less thinking that you have to do here. So overall, I really like the layout of the technology in this vehicle, but let's look at some of the features of this big fancy screen that we have. The first thing I want to point out about the features of the touchscreen here is, well, you might notice this. Every time you touch, it makes this obnoxious noise. I don't know, maybe some people like that when they touch. I personally wanted to turn that off right away, so I went into the settings here, and I went into general, screen beep, let's turn that off. I think it's much more pleasurable to be able to just touch without having it, vibrate or make a sound every time you touch. And the screen sensitivity set to 1, that's a cool feature where basically you can move it to a higher value, the screen will be more sensitive, and if you're wearing gloves, that's supposedly going to work better. I have used wireless Apple CarPlay on this car. It works quite well, and I have to say the Mark Levinson audio system is the real deal. Wow, it is a very nice system, as one would expect in a luxury car, but Lexus does a great job with that. So overall, very simple interface, very intuitive. You have your general settings, your vehicle trip information, or any alerts that might come up, maintenance items, things like that. Your phone calls for your connected Bluetooth device, your music, which can be configured from Apple Music, Amazon Music natively in the car. What this means is basically you don't even have to have your phone on you if you set these up. The car is actually running either Apple Music or Amazon Music. I'm not quite sure why Spotify isn't there, but it's not. But you also have radio if you're old school. But I just use CarPlay. However, this is all very simple and nice. You might notice that there's not a ton of stuff on screen as I'm moving around here, and I really appreciate that. Lexus has really gone for, I think, this simple approach, which is what I would personally want in a luxury car. I'm not overwhelmed by a ton of stuff. Again, I don't really love this lower screen here. I think that's a little busy and distracting, but this upper screen, I'm a big fan of. It's very modern, very intuitive. You've got a very great nav system, so that is all great. Another thing I wanted to mention about the display I don't like as much, but the vehicle display, which has your climate stuff. In this screen, it's all about vehicle dynamics. We have some off-road G monitor info there, and we have a depiction of the vehicle in its current air suspension mode. So if you follow me here, there's actually physical buttons to move the air suspension, and this is what you have to press, but of course this is a luxury SUV, so it's got air suspension. So let's lower it. And right away, noticeably, the car is lowering. That's quite quick, and you can see back on the screen here that it's updated to reflect that. So the vehicle shows that it's in that low setting. So air suspension works well, at least when parked, and maybe this screen I think still is a little redundant, but it's nice that it shows you some practical info about the car, even if I think it's a little bit overdone. Okay, we're in the back seat of the LX600 F Sport trim we have here, and very nice place to be. If my videographer comes over here, that Mark Levinson sound system I was talking about is very ornate, kind of this cool dark pattern you see if that's showing up on camera. It's very nice. Also, you do get screen shades in here. Now, in unluxurious fashion, they're manual. There's no power setting for these. That said, this is the F Sport. This is not exactly the highest trim. It's still a $100,000 vehicle, so not cheap, but this is not the fanciest trim you can get. These, what I'm just touching here, are not screens. You might have seen this vehicle with those fancy rear screens. That is also a package you get in the 4-seat luxury model. This is your standard 3-row Lexus LX600. So we don't get these cool rear passenger screens. You can configure this car with those, and what you would have if you had a screen here would just be a media interface. You could hook up an HDMI, you could actually watch Netflix or YouTube, and you would have 2 independent screens. You'd have one here, one behind the passenger, and they could be playing different things at once. But that's on the even more expensive options. But if you come down here with me, you of course get rear climate vents as you would expect, and you get a pretty decent physical interface for controlling all of the climate. You can control fan speed with this very satisfying tactile switch here. You can change the mode of the climate, temperature individually, and cooled and heated seats for both rear passengers. That's great. Another really nice thing in this interior is in the middle, you just of course have your cup holder, but this is a Lexus cup holder, so it's quite nice. When I open it, it is animated. It's a very nice mechanism, very soft, very luxurious. You can close that right up. Now, the LX600 in this configuration is a 3-row SUV, so we've got to talk about the rear space, also known as the trunk. So if I open the power liftgate here, which is very nice, you will see you have quite the aperture, quite the opening into this car, and already there is some tech to note. So we have a 120-volt AC outlet. We've looked at some very cool cars recently, like the Lightning and the Rivian, these fancy electric vehicles that provide a lot of output. This is only 100 watts, so it'll plenty enough to charge a laptop, but it's not gonna power your RV or your house or anything like that. You also have just this huge amount of space here. Why so much space? Well, I said this was a 3-row SUV, and in luxury fashion, we have buttons to actually lift the seats. So I'm gonna hold this, and one thing I don't like is that I have to hold this button down. If I stop, that seat's not lifting anymore, the car's beeping at me. I kind of get the safety rationale for that, right? They don't want you to set it, forget about it, then some kid gets their finger stuck in the seat, but I don't really like the fact that as a luxury Lexus customer, I'm holding this button down for what feels like honestly quite a long time while the seat raises. It's the same thing when I'm lowering the seat, it takes forever. So that's not something I'm a huge fan of. That said, it's nice that it automatically folds up. And of course, you've got your headrest there, quite sizable, but it is thin. So it's wide, but if you look over on the depth of it, it's not the most cushioned. So hope your passengers aren't too picky. They'll likely be kids and won't be that big of an issue. So, looking at the third row in the Lexus, there are some cool tech features here. Cup holders, that's pretty low tech, but the seat incline, or I should say the reclining of the seat, can be adjusted with this switch. You can see I'm pressing that, and that is moving the seat. So you get some adjustment even as a third row passenger. And you also have this plug cover for a USB-C outlet. And this is a symmetrical layout, so you get this on the other third row seat as well. Each passenger gets 2 cup holders and a USB-C port. Very nice to see. Also, if you don't have third row passengers, but you're a luxury customer, maybe you have a set of skis or something, well, 40, 20, 40 seats. So you've got this middle row, and that's very nice. But because this has a third row, getting into that third row isn't so bad because this seat will actually open and raise, almost like a minivan. Very nice to see in a third row SUV. As I close the power tailgate and hopefully don't get impaled by it, I have to say that I'm impressed by the technology in the Lexus LX600. It is by no means the most high-tech vehicle in its class, but I really do like Lexus's kind of understated approach to technology. They're giving you that simple power outlet, they're giving you a few USB-Cs, they're giving you physical tactile climate controls, and they're giving you what's honestly a pretty decent and much improved infotainment system with a touchscreen. So props to Lexus for doing all of that. And overall, the LX600, well, you'll see more about this vehicle, but from a technology and feature perspective, it is quite the luxury SUV.